Hello folks, this is Damien, and I'm here to describe how to use some slings today. The first sling I'm going to show you how to use is it's basically a universal sling that you're going to see used quite a bit in the industry. You see how the sling is shaped. It's cut like a horseshoe. You can kind of see that the bottom of the horseshoe is right in this area. It's cut that way so that we can make a transfer from a patient in a chair and place the sling on that patient in the chair without the need to move the patient. I'm also going to show you 3 different types of transfers with this sling. I'm going to show you a transfer from the chair to the bed, from the bed to the chair, and also a transfer from the ground. What you generally find with individuals who need this type of sling for transferring is they're generally going to be in one of 2 positions throughout the day. They're either going to be sitting or they're going to be lying down. Sitting has traditionally been a challenging transfer with a patient because they don't have a sling underneath them. Well, so let's show you how we can place this sling around a patient and transfer them with the lift without the need to move them. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to hold the sling so that the instructions are facing us. Then we're going to flip the sling upside down. And we're going to take this bottom part of the horseshoe and we're going to tuck it down behind the patient's back. We don't want it to go underneath the patient's bottom. We just want it to go to the point where it's right at the patient's tailbone in the back area. We're going to make sure that the sling's a good fit for the patient, and we do that by determining where their shoulders are in conjunction with the top of the sling. You can see right now that the patient's shoulders are right about even with the sling. If it was way higher than the patient's shoulders, then it would be too large. If it's way lower than the patient's shoulders, then it would be too small. So you want to make sure that fit is generally with the sling at the top of the patient's shoulders. I put the patient in this kind of chair so I can demonstrate the next steps in applying the sling. So now that the sling is behind the patient's back, our next step is to bring the straps of the sling around the patient's hips and underneath the legs. You can also see that it's good for me to use good body mechanics when I'm applying the sling. Instead of being up here, tugging and pulling on the sling, creating a lot of stress on my back, shoulders, so forth, it's better that I just get down to a comfortable working level with the patient. Now I bring the sling around the hip and underneath the leg, give it a slight little tug, and do the same with the other side. Give it a slight tug. Now you can see that the straps that go underneath the legs are around the patient's hips and underneath the legs. It's very important that you keep the material flat when it's underneath the patient's legs, because you'll see when I raise the patient up that this is going to be a major area of support for the patient. So I want to make sure that that's good and comfortable during the transfer. The last step is to crisscross the straps in between each other. And now we're ready to attach the sling to the hanger bar. This particular hanger bar is a 2-point hanger bar system. This is very standard out in the industry when it comes to hanger bar designs. I'm going to show you how those 4 straps connect to these 2 hooks. Now I can control positioning of the patient at the same time with the hooks and the loops. So I approach the patient with the hanger bar. This is about the right height for the hanger bar. You don't want it down in an area where it can pose danger. You want to watch the patient's head to make sure they don't fall forward and potentially hit the hanger bar. Now this particular sling has 2 loops in the shoulder area and 3 in the legs. Now I'm going to demonstrate some various things you can do with these loops from a transfer perspective. If we attach the first loop at the shoulders and the last loop at the legs, you're going to see the patient's going to be in a very good seated position. So we're hitting the up button to raise the patient up. We always want to pay particular attention to the straps to make sure that they're in the hooks. And you notice how the patient's in a very good seated position with these loop attachments. And the reason for that is because with the shortest loops on the shoulders and the longest one on the legs, it pulls the patient's body forward and lets their legs hang low, so it basically sits the patient up. So this would be a good position to set the sling in when you're going from the bed to the chair. because now that we've got you in a good seated position, when we're out of the bed, when we go to the chair, we're going to be able to position you appropriately without a lot of tugging and pulling. I'll demonstrate that a little bit later in another video. So I'm going to take you back down, and now I'm going to demonstrate how to go from the chair to the bed. So if we want you to go from the chair to the bed, we're going to reverse this process. We're going to go with the longest loop on the shoulders, and the shortest loop on the legs. We sometimes have to lower it down a little bit to get to that point, but it'll save you a lot of work with positioning the patient for the bed. I'm going to raise you up. Now notice the change in position with the patient. Quite a difference in the way that the patient looks by simply choosing a different loop. Now we're going to go ahead and take the patient into the bed to show you how much easier it is to know where you're positioning the patient when you hook the sling up correctly. So in this position, we can pretty much see where your head and where your bottom is going to end up when we take you to the bed. Plus, we get the added benefit of having some additional range on the lift. We get the unit a little bit higher, go over the bed easier. So you can see we have the patient quite high up in the air, and we're still not out of range on the device. Plus, we know where you're going to end up when we lower you down. So now that we go down, you can kind of see where your head's going to end up for the pillow. Now that you can see how the patient looks while they're laying in bed on the sling, we're going to demonstrate how to remove the sling. We're also going to demonstrate how to apply the sling when the patient's in bed. So you can see that right now the sling is crisscrossed underneath the patient just like they were before when they were seated in the chair. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take the straps away from the legs, get them out of the way. And now, since the patient's laying on the sling, we have to remove that sling from underneath them. So we're going to have to roll the patient from side to side. The easiest way to roll the patient is to get the patient to bend their knee if possible, and use the shoulder and the knee to help rotate the patient over. And you want to take the sling and kind of tuck it underneath the patient so that you'll be able to get it out from under them when you roll them back. So when I roll you back, and then we reverse the process here, we can pull the sling off and remove it without a lot of work.